What was the scariest city you've ever been to? Story 1. Albuquerque, New Mexico. I dropped off a U-Haul there and got an Uber to a sketchy hotel, chosen for its proximity to the airport. Not having my own transportation had me very anxious. At the hotel, the line of people, meth heads I assumed, in front of me couldn't provide a credit card for a room, so the line got short real quick. The small, weird elevator had bloodstains near it, so I took the stairs. I'd given my Uber driver $10 to let me stop and get food, so I wouldn't have to leave until it was time to go to the airport. I went to the room with my bags and food and locked everything and wished for more locks. The food was great. I lived in the south side of Atlanta for 4 years and never felt this sketched out, though I did get my carry permit in Atlanta. Nothing like East St. Louis, apparently, but that's my story. Story 2. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Didn't matter. Day or night, people looked at you with hatred. I spent 2.5 years in Port-au-Prince, starting 4 weeks after the 2010 earthquake, doing humanitarian response. And I never would have said people looked at me, white guy, with hatred. Things could get heated, but people were proud and vocal and considered the collective PTSD well within what I found acceptable. I maybe felt unsafe a few times, but it was in tough areas like Salino, Champs de Mars, or Delmas 32 and never got out of hand. I feel less safe walking through DC at night. Saw a newly shot woman on the sidewalk, and the next day, a human finger in a trash heap. I knew a woman who went to Haiti for volunteer disaster relief, if I remember correctly. It was the 2010 earthquake and hurricane. When she arrived, she said it was complete chaos and somehow ended up at a local hospital. Once there, people started bringing her injured persons, asking her what to do. She was not a medical provider of any kind, but there was no hospital staff or anyone with medical experience available either. She was, however, an environmental lab technician, so was aware of basic medical protocols and was certified in first aid. She said she ended up suturing quite a few cuts. I'm certified in first aid too, but in the US, we only do first aid as a way to stop further damage, with the expectation that professional medical help will be available soon. I'm not sure what I'd do if I had to help an injured person in a major disaster like, with a slim likelihood that a medical provider would be available anytime soon. Story 3. Kingston, Jamaica. I switched hotels to one more secure one. Early on my last morning, I was going to the airport, and my original hotel was on fire. I have a permanent scar on my forehead from Kingston, a little reminder of my last visit to Jamaica. People scampered to get on a bus, climbing on each other's backs. An old-fashioned Coke bottle was thrown at the bus and exploded into the crowd. One shard hit me right above the eye. There are no ambulances or police to come rescue you. Had to walk for a few miles in the heat to the nearest doctor covered in blood. Got stitches, boarded the plane with a bloody patch on my head. Fought the urge to kneel down and kiss the carpet at the Philadelphia airport. Story 4. Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Every property is surrounded by solid fences topped with razor wire, and if you can afford it, patrolled by armed guards and guard dogs. As a visitor, you should never use a local taxi or walk outside your hotel compound at night. I went there as a 15 white boy with blonde hair and blue eyes for their national swimming competition. We were hosted by families. The lady hosting us said to me right after we got there, "If you want to go for a walk, don't take any money or wear a watch, because you will get robbed." The word will was so crazy to me, not if or could. It was will. Others that stand out. They had a 14-year-old security guard who was a member of the most feared gang in PNG, so younger than me. They informed us that this is because if anyone touched their home, they would enforce it. They had a beautiful home, but it was surrounded by barbed wire and two huge German shepherds and two maids. They had a satellite with every movie in the theaters and hundreds of channels. They informed me that copywriting was not enforceable in PNG. True not, I didn't care. It was awesome. One of the best swimmers at the comp was attacked and stabbed with a piece of corrugated iron, and his friend abducted on the first night of the meet. Anytime there was a red light at a stoplight, they just blew through it because they would get carjacked. People would stare at you and smile and have these crazy eyes and bright red stains on their teeth from eating beetle nuts. It was so hot and humid during the day, they didn't let us compete from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. There is a lot more. With this, the place, the people, the culture is insanely beautiful. Story 5. Rizhao, China. Not scary so much like the others. China is insanely safe. but extremely creepy. I felt like I was on a movie set. First off, it's a city of 500,000, but it's built for a population of 10 million. But it's not like those ghost cities out west where there never was anyone. It seemed like it was actually a big city. Everyone just left suddenly. The beaches were well maintained and empty. The buses ran frequently. The streets were lined with all the usual Chinese stuff and were empty. We went into a breakfast restaurant and the food was great, but we were the only customers, and the staff seemed surprised to see us. We asked for directions to the famous fish market. No one there could tell us where it was. It turned out to be about 750 meters away. It was massive and filled with vendors selling huge quantities of incredibly fresh fish. It was mostly empty. Also, almost everything was open until the wee hours of the morning, if not 24 hours. This is unusual, even in the biggest Chinese cities, let alone this abandoned town. It was just an unsettling experience all around. Story 6. Decades ago, on a college trip to Europe, we went to Kosice in Slovakia. We got to the hotel and I asked the front desk worker, in English mind you, if it was safe to walk to the local bars and restaurants. She replied, no. I thanked her for taking a taxi. We were there for 4 days, and every time I asked if it was safe to go here or there, everyone always responded with, no. At the time, I thought Slovakia must have been the most dangerous place in the world. Years later, I found out no is Slovak for yes. Story 7. Juarez, Mexico. I'm an Irish and Mexican, redhead. Went with cousins to see my aunt and uncle. At the time, 2007, it was the most murderous city on earth. My family members were in a cartel. There was a cartel war going on, had armed men all around at all times. For all the money and cars and opulence at their home, it was like being in prison. The tension in the air was thick. I was treated like a king. But that whole week, I was terrified inside. Different world. Was told, no matter what happens, do not call the police. They worked for the other guys. I was told that if crap kicked off and anyone made it through the gates to grab a gun and shoot myself, that would be the best possible outcome. I haven't been back. Story 8. I ended up driving through this tiny town in the middle of Nevada that I assume used to be a mining town. It looked like a steady paycheck hadn't been seen in this town for 20 years. The houses were all dilapidated, and the locals looked just as worn out. Bullet holes and burn marks could be seen on pretty much every building. The only reason I drove through the town instead of just sticking to the main road was to top up on gas. But I couldn't find anything, not even a small convenience store. It must have been hell for those folks considering the closest town with an actual store and gas was around 70 miles away. Story 9. West Memphis is so sketchy. Yo, West Memphis is actually the most terrifying place to me. As soon as you enter it, it stinks for one. It smells like death. And two, I was traveling though on the way to Texas and stupidly had to stop to fill up and went to a Citgo right on the service station road by 40 at 1 a.m. and almost got abducted, like not even kidding. I was the only person in the gas station. The cashier was speaking in a different language on FaceTime, with someone started being super slow and dragging the transaction out. And as soon as I hopped in my car, a black car pulled up with someone driving and someone in the back passenger side and tried blocking me in. I just know it was a setup. Story 10th Street. Louis. It was weird for a few reasons, but the scariest was when I was leaving the hotel myself, my mom, and my two large dogs were staying at. We saw a man messing with my car, like hood was propped. As I started raising my voice and approaching with my large barking dogs, he ran. I made sure to push the hood down so it would latch, or so I thought. We loaded the car up and drove away as fast as possible. As soon as we got on the freeway, the hood blew up and almost hit the windshield. I honestly have no idea how it didn't, maybe a safety feat, so I had to pull over and resecure it. Obviously messed something up on purpose because he pulled up behind us. I got back in the car, my Diggs and mom losing their crap, drove slowly, put my hazards on, and my mom called 911. He sped off after taking pics. Weirdest experience of my life. The hotel was so sketchy and my intuition was telling me to leave the entire time. I honestly think the man was in on something with the hotel staff, or was hotel staff himself. My two dogs were extremely on edge, and they're generally easygoing. Plate numbers were stolen, and police wouldn't do anything. Story 11th. Garberville in Humboldt County, California in the 90s. This was way before pot was legal, and as an outsider, you were absolutely looked at like you were fed. Scariest damn town I've ever stopped in. They made a doc about the area. It's called Murder Mountain. Northern California is like that. It's really unfortunate because my favorite part of the state to visit scenery wise. But all those little towns just seem to really hate outsiders. So it's super uncomfortable to. The Oregon side of the border is the same way. We stopped at a little hole in the wall bar, like Eagle or Phoenix or something like that, for a couple drinks, and it was like a record scratch scene from a movie. Everyone just stopped and stared at us when we walked in, and the whole time we were there was karaoke. We realized on the way out the signage said something like crazy karaoke night or something similarly ominous. There was a sign behind the bar that said, "We don't serve tweakers." Can't say I have any interest in going back. Story 13. I've traveled to lots of places in this world. The most scared I have ever been was lost in downtown Baltimore at night on a weekend. I had made a series of mistakes trying to go around the city and had accidentally taken a spur that put me right into the downtown area. I have no clue what area of town I drove through, but the only human beings that I saw out and about at 3 a.m. in the morning looked like zombies. It's really hard to describe, but the way that they moved, the way that they looked at me as I drove by, it was very scary. Out of desperation, this was way before cell phones did anything more than phone calls and basic texts. I was still using a paper atlas. I stopped at a 7-Eleven. I was waiting in line to ask directions, and a guy went out of his way to ask me what I was doing there. That's how much I stood out. I told him that I was trying to get directions to get back onto the highway, and he told me that he was an undercover cop. Things were about to go down right there, and I needed to leave. I told him that's what I was trying to do. He thought about it for a sec, told me to get in my car, follow him, and try to keep up. He would get me to an on ramp and then go back to the store. He drove like a bat out of hell and did get me to the freeway and then busted a U turn and flew away. I have no clue how bad my night would have continued to be if he hadn't been there and guided me out of there. Story 14. Lumberton, North Carolina. Never had a visit where something weird didn't happen. Most of my dad's side of the family is from around that area. A lot of poverty, but I guess I never noticed the sketchiness. Fun story. On the way down to Grandma's house one year, my family stopped by to visit my Uncle Junior in Lumberton. It was late afternoon, and right as we showed up, Uncle Junior greeted us and proceeded immediately to hand my dad a shovel and me a garden rake. The whole time, he was updating my dad on life, and we followed him to the backyard, where he had a concrete slab with a dog pen on top. There were a few holes around the edge of the slab, and for a quick second, I noticed a can of kerosene sitting on the ground. Then Uncle Junior paused, looked at 9-year-old me, and said, "You best be ready, son, 'cause they gonna come out, and you best get 'em." Then he dropped a lit match down one of the holes, and about 100 flaming rats came scurrying out from everywhere. At first, I just stood there watching. Then I noticed my dad and uncle pancaking the rats with hand tools. This was all within 5 minutes of arriving. They also had a pretty boss trampoline, which was cool. Story 15. Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and not all. But whatever part of San Bernardino I got off the freeway at night to stop at a gas station to call my sister for directions. When I told her my cross streets, she said, "Get back on the freeway right now." I looked up and the crackheads were circling my car and tapping on my window. I was actually curious if I would see this city on the list. When I was young, around 19, I worked as a topless performer. My roommate at the time, her father, worked and lived in Laredo, Texas, and our plan was to go to Dallas, get a dancer's card, and work, make money, and work our way down to Mexico and enjoy ourselves. The third person in our little group got arrested, and it was just me and my other roommate alone. We danced at a club in Laredo, Texas, called Zodica's. We made it maybe 2 hours at that club and became terrified. It was known for its trucker clientele, and I heard some horror stories in the dressing room about what can happen to girls that come from America to work there. The next day, we crossed the border into Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. Even though it was the 90s and we were topless dancers, we didn't dress provocatively. But I was wearing a tank top and jeans, and I was harassed so much by the men there. We ate at one little hole-in-the-wall place that only played Queen, which was strikingly odd. I later learned that what we had done was incredibly stupid, not well planned, and incredibly dangerous as well. To top it all off, I didn't even make that much money. Story 16. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Almost got robbed literally 100 feet outside the airport, walking to a cab. Luckily, I saw police and my instincts made me shout hard, which made the police aware and the thieves fled the scene. Almost lost my brand new Nikon back in the time. My aunt and uncle went there for work. My uncle does intricate tile work for nice hotels. While they were there for a few weeks, they rarely left the actual hotel with all the stuff happening. My uncle said there were some issues between gangs and the police. He said multiple cops were shot and a police helicopter was shot down when they were leaving for the airport. Needless to say, they didn't finish the job and came back home to Alabama. He's done a ton of tile projects around the world, and that was the only place he said screw this and left. The amount of money he would have been paid was up there too. Story 17. Hollywood. Not scary in a physically dangerous sense, just eerie and unsettling. After seeing the Walk of Fame and the Hollywood sign, it just had this weird vibe overall. I wish I could articulate it better, but it felt strange for sure. Took my college roommate to the Walk of Fame and told her, do not take anything from anyone or listen to their story, just keep moving. We were looking inside a shop window and Spider-Man came up to us and asked to take a picture. Basically forced us, and had his friend, also Spider-Man, take the pic. He said $200. I was like, nah, man, that's $200 from you. You asked to take a picture with us. He dropped the subject real quick and walked away. She was amazed by the whole thing. Poor girl was from England and expected it to be like the movies. I told her, welcome to Hollywood. It's just crap, filled with pieces of crap. I don't think it's dangerous if you know what to expect, but I can see why unsuspecting tourists leave terrified and scammed. Story 18. I'm laughing at all the American cities listed here. Canadian cities get straight up guffaws. It was Guatemala City for me, but that's just because the driving was terrifying. The buses were awesome, though. My travel companion, who has worked all over the world as an Army Ranger and DoD employee, would not allow us to leave the hotel after dark. That said, visiting Tikal was one of the most amazing experiences of mine. Highly recommended. Wonderful people and incredibly affordable. I have a friend from Honduras, and the stories he has shared are nightmare fuel. He would sit in the hospital while his dad was dying of cancer and regularly see MS-13 members coming in missing arms from machete attacks. I was at a destination wedding in St. Lucia, and the hosts had arranged for us all to go to a street fair. One of the other guests was a SF SWAT guy. During the fair, a guy tried to steal a purse from one of our group. He just reached over and grabbed the guy's hand, and then, like a teacher, just flipped it over to show burn marks on the fingers. Crack? Maybe meth? Then released him like a fisherman throwing one back. Wasn't unsafe, but I was pretty surprised by how casual he was. About an hour later, somebody not part of our group was pickpocketed by a different person. Old boy just ran him down, hopping a fence into a chicken-filled backyard, tackled him and returned the wallet. He came back to me and I handed him the beer he asked me to hold when it kicked off. The only time hold my beer has been literal for me. Story 19. I was separated from my family on our vacation to Florida, and I got stuck in New York City for a few days, was chased around the city by criminals, was startled by a terrifying old lady covered with pigeons in the park, and was teased by what I presumed to be prostitutes. I thought I was safe in my hotel, but even the staff treated me like a criminal and tried to have me arrested. 1 out of every 7 New Yorkers is now a millionaire. Dropped my wallet on First Avenue. 3 hours later, the Mexican guy was at my door. With my wallet, everything was there. Actually, I rarely lock my door. New York City is awash in cash. We have $2,500, sushi dinners, swarms of supermodels, and $400 pre-rolls. You may want to revisit. COVID rebound, a zooming Dow, and 65 million cash spending tourists. An apartment complex on Park Avenue. Its residents have more wealth than many countries. The billionaires, many, don't have a moat, or bodyguards with AR-15s. Their protection is a single doorman. They pump a lot of cash back into their favorite city. They don't want to see guillotines on Park Avenue. So you have to keep it on the very down low. Money goes where it's treated the nicest. Right now, that seems to be New York City. Story 20, El Paso, Texas. I lived there for 3 to 4-ish years, and it was incredibly unsafe. My bar I worked at was shot up, and I was held at gunpoint, and I had a customer follow me home and break in only leaving when I pulled a gun on him. I had 2 men shot to death outside my home, one being my neighbor. Though to be fair, he partly died, only because he went up to the gunman and said he was too scared to shoot him. He shot him, and he died. My gas station across the street from my home was robbed by gun once, and also had a stabbing there. My Walmart had a mass shooting. I left just before it and was heading home during it. I got robbed by a homeless person wielding a knife. I went to get food and we had a man trying to steal our car when we came back. My apartment window was shattered due to a loon with a shotgun in my neighborhood. Had a man who I saw just randomly hitting things in public with a knife with insane violence while muttering gibberish. Had men follow me home or try to get me in their cars if I even walked just down the street. One even swerved his car in front of me in the middle of the street and tried to come up to me and looked confident enough to touch me. Again, only backed off and left while cussing at me once I pulled out a gun. Had a stalker for 2 years who broke in and stole my clothes, underwear, lingerie, and bathroom items. And he waited for me in my home after breaking in, only running when he heard my ex's voice. But he terrorized me for ages. Had to move twice very suddenly to be rid of him, despite never even meeting the man. Oh, and despite all this, the police don't give a crap. I once walked to a station to ask for help because I was being followed. They treated me like crap and acted like I was being a pain. During my first few active break-ins, I called the cops. They treated me like I was nuts on the phone. And the 3 times I bothered calling, they took 6 hours, 8 hours, and over 5 hours, respectively. Though the last call I recalled and told them to not bother showing. I just eventually had to give up and get training to use a gun, despite never even wanting to own one. Figured if no one else was going to help, so I needed a way to defend myself.